Welcome back. All right, so I want to talk about the Canucks. I did check on the channel. I have not done a video strictly about the Canucks since April. And that was when they missed the playoffs and, the road forward kind of thing. So I did that with all 32 teams. And I'm going to be doing videos like I did today in Toronto and like this one on Vancouver, but other teams as well. Of course, I covered Detroit yesterday as well. I think Ottawa bears some looking at right now, although it's hard to tell until DeBrincat moves what's going to happen there. And then there's other teams like the Kings, Sabres, etc. that might be fun to look at. But Vancouver's interesting because the plan is playoffs. And this is the frustrating part of being a Canucks fan. Every year in the offseason, it's, hey, we think we can be a playoff team next year. Now, last summer, yeah, I was gung-ho. I was waving the flag. I was pretty sure the Canucks had every chance to make the playoffs. And then right out of the gate to start the season, the answer was no. It was a resounding no. This year's schedule is tough off the start. They have an Eastern swing, I think, in early November. And so there's going to be many tests for this team early. Now, the penalty kill really hurt the Canucks, especially early in the season this past year. And since they're up against some pretty good power plays to start the season, that's going to be tested right out of the gate as well. So I don't have Kravtsov on the depth chart. They still own his rights because they gave him a qualifying offer, but he won't be playing in the National Hockey League this year. And I've got asterisks next to pending UFAs because there are certain players on this team that are in the final year of their contract that are worthy of note. So currently the team sits $2,480,417 over the cap. In terms of cap hit around the National Hockey League, they're actually third out of 32 teams. And this is an issue that Alvin inherited from Jim Benning. Then the question becomes, has it got better since Alvin took over? On some level, yes. Has it entirely? No, because they're still spending with the playoffs seemingly in mind. I know when Tocchet took over in his first press conference, he said the word rebuild, and that's disappeared. I haven't really heard it since. But again, when you're already spending to the cap and you've got good young players like Pettersson and Hughes, I understand the desire to stay in the mix. So they still want to add depth up front, as evidenced by the rumors that they're after Comtois. And they may need a backup as well, depending on how much they trust Silobs. There are other goaltenders out there right now. Martin Jones comes to mind as one of the options for a backup role. I don't know how well that would work in Vancouver, but this is a team that was 14-6-2 in the months of March and April. It was an easier schedule than earlier in the season where they had a hard time of it, but that's encouraging. And then under Tocchet, they went 20-12-4. I was a big fan of the idea of them not trying to necessarily get better at the deadline and just let it slide. Don't worry about it. You're already out of the playoffs. You're not making it. I was in favor of them falling further out and ending up with like a top 5 pick at the very least, but didn't happen. So this is a team that's been good enough to be close to the playoffs at times, but not bad enough to get a really top draft pick. Will they get that this year? That being playoffs or that number 1 draft pick. Are they still going to stay in the mushy middle? I'm hoping not. At any rate, if we look at their depth chart, so on the left side, you've got Kuzmenko, Mikheyev, Dakota Joshua, who's on an expiring contract. I like Joshua, but you've also got DiGiuseppe. According to Patrick Alvin, Tanner Pearson's going to be healthy for training camp, which is interesting because there was talk about whether or not his injured hand might cause him to need to retire. So if he's going to be healthy for training camp, that's a boost for Pearson. Pearson's a 20-goal scorer, so it's definitely a boost to the Canucks attack, but it means that things are a little bit murky then with Joshua, who I think, with the way he played this past season, has earned at least a shot at a third-line spot. But if he's behind Kuzmenko, Mikheyev, and Pearson, I don't know who he bumps down. And then you've got Höglander. Höglander played well enough in the AHL that I think he's warranted at least a look at the NHL level from the Canucks, but now there's so much depth here, I don't know that there's room for him. Then you've got McDonough. He was picked up late in the season. We'll see if he makes the team out of camp. Down the middle, you've got Pettersson, you've got Miller, you've got Bluger. It's a 1-year contract for Bluger. I've put Dries in the middle because, again, Cap Friendly they had an interesting way of looking at it. They had Bluger on the right side, and I thought, yeah, Bluger hasn't signed to play on the right wing. I know he's played there before in his career, but they signed him to be that number 3 center. So I think Dries is the number 4 center, makes some sense. I like Sheldon Dries. And then you've got Studnicka. So Studnicka's kind of an extra there. He has shown flashes of some pretty solid play, but consistently, not as much. And then there's Ratu, who they picked up, of course, from the Islanders. He had a tough go of it in Abbotsford after the trade. I think a full year of playing in Abbotsford would do him some good. I think that would help him out quite a bit, and we'll see how he develops for the Abbotsford Canucks. Then on the right side, you've got Besser, and the rumors of Besser's exit are out there. They're out there all the time. Would I be surprised if he gets traded? No. Would I be surprised if he's still here come training camp? Not really. No, I have no idea where things are standing with Besser. I know that his agent had permission to talk to other teams. I also know that even though his agents had permission to talk to other teams, he's still a Canuck. So not easy trading a player with term in this market. Then you go Beauvillier. Beauvillier had a good run with the Canucks after the trade from the Islanders and then tailed off towards the end of the season. Garland is one of those guys who's divisive. Is he good offensively? Yes. Is he worth his cap hit? That's where you're going to have some debate. But Garland, I think, is one of the ones, too, that's still being watched for potentially being on the way out because they're over the cap and they still want to add, right? And Garland's been seen as a guy that they may trade out so they can make other additions. Amon, I've got on the right side, but he played down the middle as the number 4 center at times last season, too. I like Amon. I don't know that there's any offensive upside there, but I like the player. Then there's Colson. So Colson has been kind of all over the place, not that far off of Höglander, the way things have gone for him. So the Canucks, a team that needs to develop their prospects really well. Colson, the results have been mixed. Höglander, the results have been mixed. We'll see if things turn around for Colson this coming season. Lekaramaki, he's at the prospects. He's with the prospects group in Vancouver right now. Saying it's easier this year than last year. He had a really rough start to the year, but by the end of the year, he was playing better. And then there's Klimovich. Now, he's been playing in Abbotsford. He's played well. Does he get a look? I don't know. So out of all this forward group, you have maybe a good team there, right? The blue line's where I still have a bit of concern, and I'll get into why. So you look at the exits. Ekman-Larsson, gone. Bears, gone. Burrows, gone. Dermott didn't play all season anyways, but he's gone as well. So the additions to replace these players are Cole, right, who is a second, maybe third pairing defenseman, probably third pairing. Matt Irwin, who is a depth defenseman, and then Carson Soucy comes out of Seattle. Now, there's some expectation Soucy's going to play top 4. He had a mixed season with Seattle this past year. So my one thing looking at the Canucks is I ask myself, so losing Ekman-Larsson, Bear, and Burrows, and replacing them with Soucy, Irwin, and Cole, is that an improvement on the blue line? I'm not sure. Bear had a decent season. I think he ends up being on the outs because the Canucks do have cap problems, and he's injured as well, so it makes it a little tricky to sign him, doesn't it? So for the Canucks, this blue line has its highlights, including Hughes and Hronek being the main guys, and as long as Hronek's 100% healthy, that should help. Are Soucy and Myers that second pairing? So if this is going to be a playoff team, can Tyler Myers be in the top 4? And in the final year of his contract, can that be a playoff team? And I'm asking that as a question because I don't have the answer. Let me know your thoughts. Now I've got Irwin and Cole here. Again, I just use cap friendly for the depth charts. I don't think Irwin plays ahead of Wolanin. I think they'll give Wolanin a shot in the top 6. I think Irwin probably ends up being the number 7 defenseman. Ian Cole probably does end up on that third pairing, and if it's Wolanin and Cole, that would be interesting, because Wolanin, a lot of offensive upside there. And I'm saying upside because at the NHL level, it hasn't shown yet, but at the AHL level, it has. So maybe Wolanin, if given the right opportunity by the Canucks this year, he rewards them for their patience and for giving him the chance. Tucker Pullman, I've got dashes next to Pullman's name because I have no idea if he's going to play. He barely played last year. It definitely looks like, chronic injury. Probably will have a much shortened career. And that contract is one of those ones still hanging around from the Jim Benning era, which fans will grumble about. Then you've got Brisebois. You've got Hirose. Now, Hirose played well. Could probably benefit from a full year in the AHL. But what if he outplays Irwin, and what if he outplays Wolanin? He probably ends up in the top 6 then. But Brisebois, as well, has played his way up through the roster, and he got some games in with the Canucks around the end of the season as well. Rathbone, it feels like the fans have cooled on. I know I have as well, from what we saw with him this past season when he did play in the NHL. McWard didn't look out of place when he got signed late, but you always got to watch NCAA guys. They come in late, they play some games, they may not get a chance to play the following season. You've got Noah Juleson, AHL depth there. I like Juleson, and I like him being in Abbotsford. He's from Abbotsford, so it makes a lot of sense. Jet Wu, my stepdaughter's favorite. And, I mean, who doesn't think Wu's a fun last name? At any rate, Wu is 22 years of age at this point. I don't know if there's any upside there from an NHL perspective, but it's fun to have him in Abbotsford. Johansson might be the wild card in this. Johansson, when they picked him up, there was some belief that he might be that ace in the hole, that maybe he would be NHL ready and he could step right in and play for the Canucks. Hasn't happened yet. Does it happen this fall? And if it does, who's it at the expense of? Who comes out of the lineup, right? And then I've got Willander in red. He has yet to sign his entry-level contract. It sounds like that will happen. Very well spoken. Probably not NHL ready at this point, but we always have surprises from that perspective. And then goaltending. And this is where things are really interesting to me. So you have Demko is clearly the starter. Demko has to be back to being Thatcher Demko. The Thatcher Demko that we saw at the end of the season, not the one we saw at the start of this past season, and he's got to stay healthy. Silovs right now has the inside track on the backup job. He pushed Martin down the lineup. I think he pushed Delia back a little bit as well, although Delia is now gone as a free agent. He went to the Jets, I believe. But yeah, so Silovs right now is, by default, I would think the backup. Spencer Martin, I know there are Canuck fans that still have a soft spot for Spencer Martin based on not this past season, but the season before. Spencer Martin, I think, is a good AHL goaltender. I don't know if he is a good NHL goaltender. And if the answer is, well, you know, they could use Martin as the backup. And then if something happens to Demko, my answer to that is no. If something happens to Demko, I'd rather be in a situation like a Carolina where you've got Ronta as the backup, right? You want to have I think it has to be an experienced backup goaltender who can step in if Demko gets hurt for weeks at a time. And that's important. And I don't know that they have that. Now, they signed Sachenko as well. So there may be some upside with Sachenko. But at this point, I don't think they have the backup that they're going to have in October. I don't think they're done. I think we'll see some of the guys on this board traded out. And or maybe at the next buyout window, they're able to buy somebody out as well. Because they do need to figure this out. Make sure they're under the cap. And if the plan is to make the playoffs this year, I do think there are some holes in the lineup that need to be resolved. And especially from a point of view of, I would say, adding a couple more experienced depth forwards wouldn't be a bad move. Having an experienced backup goaltender, and are you 100% happy with the blue line? And I'm asking that to Canucks fans as well, because remember, this team didn't just lose. At the exits aren't just Ekman Larsson, Bear, Burrows, Dermott, Kravtsov, and Delia. Most of those being players that fans won't be too upset with losing. But also at the deadline, they lose Horvat, Shen, Lazar, Stillman, Lockwood. And yes, Stillman had a rough time as a Canuck. Not going to say he didn't. But that's some good depth that they shed here, and they're trying to make up for it here. And the one question that I'm trying to answer in my head is this Vancouver lineup right now better than the lineup they had last summer when everything was done with free agency? I don't know that I know the answer to that. I hope this is a team that makes the playoffs, because really the disappointment in Vancouver, it's getting kind of stale at this point. But I don't know that I see it. I really don't know that I see it. I know that's the plan. I know they look at the record under Tocchet. But keep in mind that rumor at the time was they intentionally didn't fire Boudreau, in part because they knew that Eastern swing that they were going to go on, that they went through teams like Carolina, Tampa, Florida, et cetera, et cetera. They knew that was going to be a rough road trip, so they waited until that trip was done before they hired a new coach. So would Tocchet's record have been that sparkling if he had been the coach during that East Coast swing? No. But again, the Canucks selling their fans on this idea of, hey, we might get it done. It's going to depend on, JT Miller playing a really good two-way game. That's important. His two-way play got better when Tocchet took over, but there's a lot of things that need to fall in place, and they have to stay healthy. This is not a team that has the kind of depth to deal with a couple of high-profile losses. So if Pettersson got hurt and then if Hughes was out at the same time, that might be all it takes. And so let me know your thoughts on where you see the Canucks this season. At this point, we're not done the offseason. Obviously, there's other moves to be made. But let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.